What's up, YouTube? It is your girl Latrina, and I am back again today with another tarot spread read. And starting off in our first row, we do get the Wheel of Fortune. We also get the Four of Swords, the Wheel of Fortune with the Four of Swords. And we also get the Bad Health card coming out in the reverse, along with the Visit card. And that Wheel of Fortune, it speaks of an inevitable change in a particular situation. There has been an inevitable change with that Wheel of Fortune card coming out in that first row. And this change may be regarding something coming to rest, because that Four of Swords speaks of rest and rejuvenation. And it even speaks of the Lord of resting from strife. Somebody has to come to rest, has to put something to rest after some strife. And even, a situation that may have led to bad health, or maybe something that they're recovering from, you know, this inevitable change has required some recovery. It has required someone to recover. And even, it's regarding something, about a visit. Maybe this visit was to a doctor, or, about their health condition. Something has come to rest, and it's an inevitable change when we talk about this Wheel of Fortune. Something that has been in repeat mode, like almost like a cycle or a circle, something that's just been going round and round. It has actually been forced someone to put something to rest, and it may be, so that they could recover. Or maybe it's to actually change, their current health situation, due to this inevitable change. They were forced to put something to rest, and it's due to their health not being good, and it maybe they want to reverse their health situation by putting something to rest. They think that that will, reverse their health situation, their bad health situation. And it did require them to even, either make a visit to the doctor, because in that bad health card, this person is looking like a patient, in recovery from something that they had to put to rest, because there was an inevitable change that came upon this situation regarding this. Maybe they had multiple options, multiple chances to put something to rest. And they finally had to, due to their health. Their health is what caused them to have to put something to rest. The Lord of Strife, they had to rest from that strife, because that Four of Swords speaks of the Lord of Strife. And then in our second row, we do get the Eight of Cups, along with the Milady card, which she's also laying in the bed. This is regarding an illness or some kind of a disease even. In the reverse, though, that may be speaking of, someone seeking wellness. Someone is looking for wellness. Well, from what we've seen in that first row, they want to put an end to their bad health, and it may be regarding something that was. It has something to do with a thief, something that someone didn't take. Um, Maybe it was a vice, or maybe it was something dealing with this by the sword. They had to walk away from something, trying to win at all costs. They had to drop those swords because this five did come out in the reverse. This five of sword comes out in the reverse. Speaking of a person that has to put an end to the winning at all costs measure, they had to walk away from that frame of mind, or from that state of being. And they may not be speaking about their, current situations. They're not going to speak about this, putting an end to this, you know, winning at all costs. They will not, they haven't even spoken about it. There's been no words, you know, when it comes to their health, and when it comes to something that they actually didn't take. Because when this thief card comes out in the reverse, it speaks of, someone maybe not being a thief, or maybe someone regrets, taking something. Someone, it's put them into bad health, and it's even maybe they think, that their actions of taking something and trying to win at all costs, they had to actually put a reverse to those efforts and actions, and those ambitions. They've had to actually move in a different direction from that, taking, and they walked away from trying to win at all costs. And it's really dealing with whatever disease or illness that they have. Or maybe, because this Milady card is in the reverse, they did put an end to this, they want to reverse this illness. That's why they had to put an end to being a thief and trying to win at all costs. They had to walk away from that way of being, because of this illness that they have contracted. And it's actually like a disease. And then we next get the Ten of Cups coming out in the third row, along with the family room, and along with the sadness card in the reverse. So someone wants to probably, change their current, situations with this sadness in the reverse. They want to actually be happy. Someone wants to be happy in this situation, because we do get this King of Swords coming out also in that third row, which speaks of, manipulation, trickery, control, war, like a war tactic type of a person, someone that is, narcissistic. And then we get the recovery card also coming out in the reverse, meaning that something, someone maybe, in sadness due to this no recovery. There's been no recovery to their health. There will be none, because of the fact that they wanted to try to change the situation regarding their family, this family room, and this, manipulation that was done about a family. Because that Ten of Cups also speaks of the family, and a happy home, and things like that. And it looks like, this illness and this disease and this winning at all costs. Someone, and like I said, there's been an inevitable change to someone's health. And as well as their options. They don't have the option anymore but to put something to rest. They don't have any more options. They want to reverse the sadness. They want to bring a happy home into their situation. They want to, work on something with this family room. This individual that was, pretty much like a control freak, a narcissist, even, someone that is very manipulative. And they don't want to see, something go to the law, because when that comes out in the reverse, whomever this person is that may be falling upon an illness or a disease or, dealing with this situation, it's probably because they don't want to, face the law when it comes to this wheel of fortune that's come in on this situation. Inevitable. It's an inevitable change from to the cycles. They don't have any options. And it's, because their health, they want to try to reverse their health condition. They think that if they make better choices from now on, that it may be revert. It may have a positive effect on their health, their current health situation. Maybe they want to give something back that they did take, and they want to put an end to the winning at all costs. And they want to be happy, because they, this sadness card comes out in the reverse. So that tells me somebody wants to be happy. And they do not want to face any legal issues, with this King of Swords. And they want to recover something, There's been no recovery, in this matter. There will be no recovery in this matter with this family room and with this happy life and happy home. There will be no recovery to that situation. And someone, may be feeling out in the cold, due to this winning at all costs and something that they took. They may want to try to give it back to come out of the cold. That may be a reason why they want to return something with this thief in the reverse. And maybe they maybe want to return something and they want to actually be a better person other than a thief. They want to be somebody that's more trustworthy because of their health and this illness and disease. They had to walk away from being a thief because of this illness and disease. They had to walk away from winning at all costs as well, because the Wheel of Fortune, which does speak of an inevitable changes, something is inevitable about this health situation, and it's not something that they can really change. It's inevitable, and it's put an end to their choices and their options even. Because in this fourth row, we do get the Seven of Swords coming out, along with the Page of Swords, which is the messenger. Them pages, they bring in information. They carry messages with them. And they can, this message may not be so good, They may bring in some bad news. And the bad news that they may be bringing in is, is regarding some deception. Because that Seven of Swords speaks of deception. And then we also get the imprisonment card coming out on top of that Page of Swords. So someone may have gotten a message, about having to go to jail, due to some sort of a loss. And maybe it was a financial loss that they, we got that thief card coming out, so something was lost when it deals with this, situation here regarding this individual that's facing an inevitable change in their health, an inevitable change, to something that was taken. They had to walk away from that, and even, it did cause the loss. The situation that they did take, or that they do want to, maybe stop trying to win at all costs. It is regarding something about imprisonment, They want to be, maybe they want to avoid imprisonment, going to jail. They want to avoid that, because maybe they're getting a message about, having to do some time for this deception, and trickery that was taking place at some point in time. There was deception and trickery, involved in this reading, involved in this individual's life choices, And then in our last row, we do get the High Priestess card coming out. And, that speaks of the divine feminine, and it speaks of intuition. The divine feminine and the intuition. And then we get the Justice card on top of that High Priestess. Which kind of speaks for itself. And then we get the Judication card coming out in the reverse, as well as the Death card coming out in the reverse, which, maybe somebody refused to put something to an end. Regarding this judication, that they didn't, it didn't go in their favor because they refused to put something to an end. And it's regarding some trickery and deception, and even financial loss is also involved. And then, we see some spell work being casted with this Justice card also. It depicts some type of a spell, caster with this voodoo doll down there. There's going to be justice brought to this judication, because this Justice card comes out right with, somebody refusing to let something, in. Somebody refused to let something in when it comes to this court matter that didn't go in their favor. They refused to let something in regarding an injustice that was done, maybe to this High Priestess, this divine feminine. They refused to put something to an end. They didn't want to see this High Priestess breathing. They didn't want to see this judication go in, in this High Priestess favor. They tried to keep this judication, in the reverse from this High Priestess. They wanted to keep it, from going in the favor of this High Priestess coming out in that last row. They refused to let something in, and then, something in this first row, which is the main actual importance, in my opinion, it usually delivers the core of the message, is that they, it was an inevitable change that came upon this situation. And it maybe had to do with their health, and then some kind of a disease or illness. Came upon this thief that refused to, he wanted to win at all costs in this situation. But he's been forced to walk away. Whomever this individual is has been, actually forced with no choices and no options but to walk away from something that wasn't being spoke about, something that was being kept secret, because when somebody refuses to speak, then that means they're keeping something secret, and this is the card that lets me know they refuse to speak, because it says those who are silent do not say nothing. And then we got the winter out in the cold on the message side. So they, like I said, they refuse to put an end. They refuse to walk away from something, maybe being, that has something to do with stealing and not speaking. They refuse to do that, and it's actually affected their health, and brought upon them a disease. And that disease is causing them to actually take a visit to the doctor, because whenever you see this visit card, and then you can see this bad health, this guy is being, given some treatment from some kind of facility, a nurse or a doctor, at least a nurse, if nothing else. They have a depiction of a nurse in the card. Maybe they have to take regular visits to the doctor due to this inevitable change. Something has come to rest.